Alright, this is the Boost by Smith launch shift light with auto shift output. I'm just going to show you how to program it and a couple things on it real quick. For connections on the bike, this is one set up for a Hayabusa. On a Gen 1 Hayabusa, this plugs in on your front cowl up by the right turn signal. There'll be a connector that looks just like this, probably black though, sitting there not doing anything. You can just plug right in. This connector on my harness at that point would be unused. Wouldn't have to worry about that guy. On a Gen 2 Hayabusa, up above the headlight, there's two little lights that actually have this same connector on them, and they're plugged in on the bike. You would unplug one of those and plug my harness in line. So you'd plug my harness into the bike and then the other headlight right back into it, so you don't lose any functionality on the bike and you get power and ground with the key on without having to do any wire splicing. The other connections we have, blue is your clutch signal. This needs a switched ground signal in order to activate the launch light. So on most sport bikes you do have a switched ground signal when you pull the clutch in. Don't be confused with the ground all the time. And Kawasaki's can be confusing because the clutch signal wire is grounded when the bike is in neutral, allowing you to start the bike without pulling the clutch in just by pushing the starter button with the bike in neutral. Suzuki's don't work that way, and Kawasaki's that can make things a little bit confusing. The green wire is the tach signal wire, which would get connected to number 1 ignition coil ground, or on most Suzuki's, if you don't have something like a Wego or some other data logger that could mess with the signal, you can go right to the yellow with blue tracer wire that goes up to the back of the gauge cluster. That is a tach signal wire. Get your toggle switch here. This will shut off or turn on the auto shift output if you have purchased that. If you have 2 relays, you have auto shift output, which sends a ground signal to an existing kill box or air shifter through this connection here. So if you look at this toggle switch, right now that is in the off position. So if I look at these 2 wires which are biased to the left, my toggle switch is basically going in that same direction. So the toggle switch is off. And this direction, going opposite of where those 2 wires are, that is on. So you always want to make sure your auto shift output is turned off when you're not using it. When you do any programming changes here, it flashes the relay, which flashes as ground, which if you're hooked up to your air shifter, it's going to start shifting your transmission, which could damage your trans, and that would be a bummer. So I'll show you real quick how we program this thing. So I will plug in here, just like I would on a bike. So now when I flip that switch, it's the same thing as turning my key on. And I'm going to hook my blue wire up to a ground, which is like me pulling the clutch in. And I'm going to connect an LED to this, because that's how we see the programming changes, is by watching an LED flash. All the programming is done inside of here, and I'll apologize, I'm trying to do this with one hand. It's kind of a pain in the ass. So on your board here, you can see I've got 2 buttons in all of my directions. Button 1 would be the button on the left hand side. Button 2 would be the button on the right hand side. And you've got dip switches 1 through 7. When you can read them correctly like this, on is up, off is down. Okay, so for Suzuki, to program the number of cylinders, you need to set it to 2-cylinder mode, which is actually dip switch 1, which you can see in the table. And what I have to do if I was on a bike is I would have to push and hold button 1 and 2 while I turn the ignition key on. So your ignition key would need to be off. Okay, I'm going to push and hold button 1 and 2. I'm going to keep holding these things. I have to put this down for a quick second while I turn the key on. So while I'm still holding it, you hear the relay start clicking and you see the relay flashing. So when I let go, it's going to flash my setting back to me, and it's going to flash 2 times. That means I'm set to 2-cylinder mode. On a Kawasaki, or on something where you're actually going to one of the ignition coils, you would have to set it to coil unplug mode, which is dip switch 5. And if I was to do that, it would only flash back to me one time, meaning one cylinder mode or coil unplug. To set my launch window, I'm going to set my launch window to 500 RPM, which just means whatever I have my launch light RPM set to, the launch window, it will shut the launch light off at that amount of RPM above the setting. So I'm going to set the thing to a 5,000 RPM launch window, launch light with a 500 RPM window, meaning at 5,500 RPM, if I rev the bike too high, the LED would go back off. Okay, now with the key already turned on, you push and hold button 1 and 2 again, just like you did for number of cylinders, except for there's no switching of the key while I'm holding the buttons. So my ignition key is already on, push and hold button 1 and 2. Okay, and I need to have my clutch handle pulled in order to see this launch setting. You'll notice that my relay is not clicking at this point because it's not cycling the shift solenoid. It's only doing the launch functions, which don't do that. So when I let go of the button, it's going to flash back to me 5 times for 500 RPM. 3, 4, 5. Okay? Now to set my launch RPM, you can look in the table. It's the same table that you look at for shift RPM, which goes from 3,000 to 15,700. For 5,000 RPM, his dip switches 3 and 5 on. Okay, I'm going to push and hold button 2, the one on the right. And you will notice that it's flashing like crazy till I let go of it. I would have to hold my clutch handle in order to see this happen, so tie strapping that might be advantageous. Let go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's going to do 2 quick blinks, which simulate or signifies 1,000. So basically 5 followed by 2 blinks is 5,000. 9,000 would be 9 blinks followed by 2 quick ones. 10,000 is a little bit confusing, but you'll see that one here in just a second when we do the shift RPM. Now the shift RPM I'm going to set to 10,000, I think it's 600 that I normally do, which is 3, 4, and 7 up. Okay, now to see the shift RPM on a light that has auto shift output, I need to release my clutch. That actually blocks the LED from illuminating if you've got the clutch handle pulled in, even though the shift solenoid would cycle. So now my clutch is no longer pulled in, and with the key is already turned on and everything, I'm going to push and hold button 1. You'll hear my relay clicking. When I let go, it's going to flash back to me 10,600, and you'll see the way that it does this. So it's going to flash once for 10, 2 quick blinks, that means 1,000, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that was 1, 2 quick blinks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is how you should. That is how it displays 10,600 RPM. If you've already programmed the light, but you want to know what you actually programmed in, you can, instead of pushing and holding the buttons, you can just tap the button once. So this will flash 10,600 again. Okay, if I wanted to know what my shift or my launch RPM was, when I display the launch RPM, it will actually tell me my launch RPM, then there'll be a pause, then it'll tell me my launch window. So if I just tap button 2, it's going to go, oh, it would help if I was actually pulling the clutch handle in or grounding that wire. Okay, so I'll finish. So I'll tap button 2, and it's going to show me it's 5,000 RPM, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2 quick blinks. Then there'll be another pause, and it's going to show me launch window, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that means 5,000 with a 500 upper launch window. If I wanted to see number of cylinder settings, I can tap button 1 and 2 together at the same time. And you can see this thing is set to 2-cylinder mode. That's how you program the light. If you can get the light to program like that, you've got things most likely wired correctly from a power, ground, and clutch signal standpoint. If you can't get the LED to come on when you rev the bike, either you're not revving it high enough, the shift light comes on at a higher RPM than what your tach will show, because most motorcycle tachs read really, really high, or you've not hooked into the correct tach signal wire, or you've hooked into a tach signal wire that something like a WeGo data logger is messing the signal up on, and you might have to move to a different place. Another way you can check to see if things are wired correctly is if you shut your key off on your bike, you pull the clutch handle in and hold it in, and you turn your key on, you should see the light flash one time. That's the launch light. If I was not holding in the clutch handle and I turn my key on, you don't see anything happen. It only flashes the launch light, not the shift light. The auto shift output ground wire here, you would hook that to the ground input on your existing kill box. On an MPS kill box, I believe that's a brown wire. On a Cycletech kill box, I believe that is a white wire. On my ECU air shifter harnesses that I sell, at the 2-pin connection where your solenoid goes, it would be the white wire here. So normally what you would do is just plug in the mating connector here, the 2 wires that go off to your solenoid, the one that's connected to the white wire here, you would basically tap into that wire. So that way when your toggle switch is on and the shift LED comes on and that relay clicks, it would send a ground signal to that white wire, which is the same thing as tapping your horn button, and that would get you going. All right, I think that's about it. Thank you.